5 establishes that the territory of a state shall not be subject to military occupation as a result of the use of force in contravention of the UN Charter. Allowing such acts to go without an effective answer would amount to normalizing the replacement of law by might, while eroding the very foundations of the collective security system. Today, it is not only Venezuela's sovereignty that is at stake, the credibility of international law, the authority of this organization, and the validity of the principle that no state can set itself up as the judge, party, and executor of the world order are also at stake. Mr. President, we cannot ignore a central element of this U.S. aggression. Venezuela is the victim of these attacks because of its natural resources. Our country's oil, energy, strategic resources, and geopolitical position have historically been factors of greed and external pressure. When force is used to control resources, impose governments, or redesign states, we are faced with a logic that harks back to the worst practices of colonialism and neocolonialism. Accepting such a logic would mean to open the door to a deeply unstable world in which countries with greater military capacities can decide by force the political and economic destinies of other states. This scenario not only threatens Venezuela, it threatens international peace and security as a whole. If the kidnapping of a head of state, the bombing of a sovereign country, and the open threat of further armed action are tolerated or downplayed, the message sent to the world is a devastating one, namely that the law is optional and that force is the true arbiter of international relations. Venezuela firmly believes in diplomacy, dialogue, and peaceful coexistence among nations. That has always been our historical position, and it remains so today, even in the face of an aggression of this magnitude. It is precisely that commitment to peace, the one that was violated on the 3rd of January. Therefore, Venezuela urges this Security Council to fully assume its responsibility and to act in accordance with the mandate conferred upon it by the Charter of the United Nations. In that regard, we request, A, that the government of the United States of America be demanded to fully respect the immunities of President Nicolas Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores, as well as their immediate release and safe return to Venezuela. 2, that the use of force against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela be clearly and unequivocally condemned. Thirdly, that the principle of non-acquisition of territory or resources by force be reaffirmed. And 4, that measures aimed at de-escalation, the protection of the civilian population, and the restoration of international law be adopted. Mr. President, in spite of the seriousness of the events, Venezuela would like to inform this body and the international community that its institutions are functioning normally, that constitutional order has been preserved, and that the state exercises effective control over all of its territory. In accordance with our constitution, Executive Vice President Delcy Rodriguez is being sworn in as acting President of the Republic, thereby guaranteeing institutional continuity, stability, and internal peace. We wish to convey a message of serenity, confidence, and hope to the Venezuelan people. Venezuela is a nation that believes in peace, work, and dignity. Our commitment is to diplomacy and law, and the law is firm and unwavering. We defend our sovereignty without renouncing our values. We bet on dialogue without accepting imposition. We believe in a future of coexistence, development, and mutual respect among nations. We trust that this Security Council will rise to the historic moment facing humanity and choose the path of legality, collective responsibility, and peace. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
And welcome back. Of course, going straight away to having the contextual understanding of our topic with you, dear Haley. Let's have a holistic analysis of the events that happened on the 3rd of January 2026, pertaining U.S. Invasion of Venezuela and the kidnapping of the legitimate President Nicolas Maduro of the country, and how does this undermine international order and sovereignty?
There is no international order or sovereignty when the most powerful military in the world can, without cause, go in and kidnap a president and first lady. That's the first point. And to even assume that there's a basis for discussing that shows the lack of commitment to precisely this idea of dialogue and solidarity. From the United States, we saw the president give an interview to the New York Times where he said he doesn't accept international law, where he said that he will do what he wants to do. Now that's throwing out all treaties and all agreements going back to the founding of the United Nations. And so the question is going to be, how do you bring the United States into coherence with international law? And I'll just add that President Trump, when he came into office, said he wanted to end regime change, he wanted to end permanent wars, and yet he adopted a policy which is precisely the policy of the war hawks and the neocons in the United States. So it's not just the international community that has to act, the American people have to act. The American people voted for him in part because he said he was going to end this kind of behavior. And now he's doubling down on it. So I would say that that's the starting point for the discussion. This is unacceptable under any circumstances. There's no evidence to back the charges, and this has to be reversed immediately.
Looking at how this can be reversed to give meaning to the precept of international law and order. In the same perspective with you, Ricardo, of course you're joining us live from Venezuela, implying that you actually contextualize our topic for today with the real stakes of the country at this juncture, especially as the latest development shows that officials in Venezuela have entered talks with the Trump administration regarding their diplomatic ties. And of course, let's be frank that this has to just do with Venezuela's oil reserves.
Well, the first topic is that Venezuela is still under the command and or under the decisions of the Bolivarian Revolution. There is a lot of unity on our leaderships, and there's a lot of unity in the military units and in the military command and in the political command and all around the people. You know, since the first hour, since the 0 hour, the people start to organize to protect the people, to protect themselves. And after that, the people organized to have this reoffensive over the attacks on the United States. But it doesn't mean an offensive based on the military actions. It means the offensive based on what the United States is trying to do, that is about to break the unity, is about to go on this murdered and aggressive campaign on the psychological war that is over Venezuela at this moment. There is another thing important to do is that to talk about is that we are not only defending the existence of the Bolivarian Revolution, we are talking about the existence of the Republic. So it means that not only people that supports Bolivarian Revolution is on the street. There is a lot of people that didn't was supporting Nicolas Maduro that's going to the streets and to the demonstration to ask and demand United States to liberate our president and our first commandant, Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores, that took that become a prisoner of war in United States. The president Nicolas Maduro has become a global anti-imperialist. Let's remember the last words and the last expressions of Nicolas Maduro was "no to crazy war, no war." He was very clear about the situation that was about to come, and there is another important phrase that our president in charge, Delcy Rodriguez, has taken, is that we are not becoming a colony. Venezuela is not becoming into a colony. We are still working under the rules of the and as you can see in my reports on social media and the reports of the other journalists on social media and international press, the people feels very safe. We are not afraid to United States bombings, and there is another important topic that we need to understand is that United States didn't win on elections. They confessed that Nicolas Maduro won the election of the past July of the year 2024, because he told that Maria Corina Machado hasn't the popularity and the people's support and the international support to rule the country. So, who has the popularity and the trust and the love of the people? Nicolas Maduro. They recognize that the Bolivarian revolution is very organized, and the Bolivarian revolution maintains the peace and the control of the country. So they have to negotiate with us. The other stuff is that we are not gifting oil to United States. Our oil is not a present to the United States. We are starting to commerce oil in the terms that our national company and our president in charge, Delcy Rodriguez, choose. But of course, that there is a lot of there's a lot of confusion about everything that Donald Trump says. He also he's also trying to control this media table, the media concert, to say that Venezuela is on knees, to say that Venezuela is defeated. But why don't they have the control of the power? Why didn't they keep troops on Venezuela? Now they have to fight inside of the Congress. Now they have to fight in the international space of debates. On the UN and the other spaces. And without the democracy, without control, the demonstrations on the street, with our peaceful troops, or our peaceful military troops, with the control of the Bolivarian revolution, we forced the United States to take arms and to confess that there is no another way to defeat the Bolivarian revolution that doesn't have to be with a criminal way to act. You mean, with this bombing and these criminal acts. We appreciate from Venezuela that the whole world is uprising, and the whole world is denouncing that Donald Trump has become a criminal of war. And we know that this is going to end well for the whole world. This is going to end well for Venezuela, and we will keep being an independent country and an independent movement, and we will release Nicolas Maduro. The people is actually at this day is on the street asking for the release of Nicolas Maduro. We know that our country and our leaders has choose the best defense for the president and for the first commandant.
Absolutely.
And we really trust that this is going to end well, because we are giving a lesson to the United States, and we are sending a message to the whole world that there could be peaceful revolutions. There could be a best or a better way to distribute the wealth of a country. And if there is unity, the United States on their imperialist concept are defeated. There has to be another way to rule the world, and it's not the way of the war, and it's not the way of the bombing of other countries to make them take the decision that United States want. Of course, that we are going to a diplomatic way, to a diplomatical moment, that we have to return to these conversations, because we have to defend our president and our first commandant. We know that the trials are about to start, and we need to have these connections on ground to improve the work that we can do there. And of course that the United States has to start the diplomatic work, to start to start to work about the oil selling that we have to do now with the United States. But I mean, it's not a gift of oil. We are selling the oil that on the coast
on your terms
that it has. Okay.
Okay. So I will come back to you subsequently, because this is actually an event that has reshaped the political dynamics of Venezuela. At the same time, it is causing some sort of changes around the globe as far as international order is concerned. Just been informed that Mr. Owusu from Ghana just joined the conversation. If you can hear me, sir, you're welcome to the program Global Insight. And we are looking at the tactics of militarism and conquest. This is something that is also happening across the African continent. But then we still see this one happening in Venezuela as an eye-opener to, international order. What can you say holistically regarding the U.S. invasion of Venezuela, and how this can transcend to the diplomatic lines between the African continent and particularly the global south?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. Firstly, when we woke up that morning in West Africa, and we heard that the president of a sovereign country has been taken the way that it was done with the wife, and currently we see bruises around the eyes of the wife or on the face. Everyone was alarmed. In fact, even people who were not so much of Maduro fans, or people who may not have liked President Maduro, did not like the idea. And currently, I would say that if you check around the world, there are many groups that have looked at what is happening in Venezuela, or what just happened in Venezuela, and in all, majority of every particular group you select doesn't seem to be happy. If you took even US allies in Europe, they are not happy about this. And the German president has popularly said that this disrupts the global order, because you don't have the right to enter into someone's country, the capital, and seize their president and the first lady. Now, what this does is that it's not only the United States that has the power to do what it did. Other countries may equally do so. In fact, some of us were outraged when in February 2022, Russia decided that it was going to kill and engage in decapitation, where the leaders, Zelensky was going to remove from power. Many of us did not agree to that because you could not do that to a sovereign country. And in the similar vein, or with that principle, we also believe that the United States had no business to be in Venezuela to extract a president or to kidnap a president the way it did. Now, that aside, even within the United States, we found Congress, and despite the kind of polarization of United States politics, 5 senators joined Democrats to say that, look, any other action or further actions in Venezuela would need our approval. And that should tell you that even within the United States and within the Republican Party, not everyone is happy with this. But then again, you move to history and you talk about the Monroe Doctrine. That is seemingly being revived or resuscitated by the Trump administration. And even with that, that wasn't what President Monroe suggested. Monroe was trying to insulate or isolate the United States from the rest of Europe when Europe was embarking on aggressive colonialism of the rest of the world. The United States did not want Monroe, did not want the Europeans to have a foothold in the Western Hemisphere. And that was what the Monroe Doctrine was about. It was not about entering into people's countries and seizing their leaders. Yes, during the Cold War, some similar things had happened in terms of U.S. interventions or, let's say, interference in other people's businesses. The Cold War was over when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. And currently, we are increasingly moving towards multipolar world where rules are essential to establish international peace and stability. If in a multipolar world where we don't have unipolarity, where no one has exclusive rights over the use of power, you do not allow one country, or one country does not have the right to enter into others, because others may do the same. And currently people are talking about Taiwan. Yes, Taiwan is not a sovereign country. That is quite debatable. But Ukraine and other countries that are being threatened by more powerful ones. What do we say to that? Are we going to have an international system that is rule-based, or we are just going to allow people to do what they want? Already, President Trump has said that he does not heed to international law. He's only limited by his own morality. And that is also another big question mark, because it's very difficult to actually define what is the morality of the President of the United States currently as a person. So, yes, even among the electorate in the United States, only 33% approved of what happened in Venezuela. And these are hardcore, political, perhaps fanatics, who would support that. That should tell you that what he did is even unpopular among the population. So then, if you are looking at everything, then you come to the solid issue of sovereignty. That Venezuela will remain a sovereign country. In fact, if you look at the plan, after taking Maduro out of Caracas, what next? What next is trying to bully the country in the Gulf of Mexico and beyond. But within the country, it looks like U.S. has no particular control in what is happening within the country. Yes, we have heard that there are some collaborations going on, but then that is neither here nor there, because a sovereign country is a sovereign country. And some of us in Africa, we will not be happy to wake up and see that our presidents, no matter how unpopular they are just being removed that way, because then it could create some chaos. We want some dictators out of power, but through the people must vote these dictators out of power. If they do not have any chance to vote them, we believe that revolutions happen. We saw that in the Arab Spring. We've seen that severally in Africa, where presidents or leaders, dictators have left their country because the people got up and drove them out. You allow the systems or such systems to, correct themselves. We do not want people who may have even questionable characters or questionable attitude to be deciding for the rest of the world, including Africa. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about understanding the narratives. Coming back to you, dear Hali, probably, yeah, I want to take, since Mr. also just mentioned the Ukraine crisis, do you think the situation in Venezuela can be compared to actually what is happening in the crisis in the Donbass? And another question, which is linked to that, I would love that probably you explain the concept of this this hyper war where countries use military might to undermine smaller nations that are seemingly weak in terms of their military capacity, like what we saw in Venezuela, where the United States through Donald Trump controlled the narratives, cited narco-terrorism, and then the end result was a conspiracy that led to the kidnapping of a legitimate president.
Well, there's so many things from that question to unravel. Let me start with the Ukraine question. I don't consider what the special military operation launched by Russia against Ukraine to be similar to what Trump just did to Venezuela. Putin tried for years to get an acceptance from the Western countries that there was a legitimate security concern that Russia had with NATO moving up on its borders. No country can turn its back to having an enemy, as NATO was an enemy to Russia, to move weapons to the border and then to start killing people in the eastern part of that country. And Putin did try repeatedly. They had the Minsk Accord, and the West lied to the Russians about it. So I don't think there's an equivalence. I don't think Trump can say, well, Putin did it, so we can do it. And even if that were the case, if someone acts badly, that doesn't give you an excuse to do the same. Now, secondly, on the question of drugs, look, this is complete hypocrisy. The CIA has been the major drug trafficker in Central America for years. This is what the whole Iran-Contra affair was about. This is what the Southern Air Transport was about. This was about the funding of the Contras. This is a perfect example of changing the subject. And they even had to admit that there is no such thing as the drug gang that they say Maduro was in charge of. So what is this about? Is it really an attempt to save the American people from drug traffickers? No. You want to save Americans from drug traffickers? Go after the big international banks that launder the drug money. And that drug money is used to fund operations against the countries that are involved in the drug traffic. The idea of shooting boats out of the water is going to stop drug trafficking is absurd. Now, the bigger point here is, as I said earlier, President Trump won the election in 2024 by saying that he was going to put an end to this kind of great power claim that they had a right to go to war, that they had a right to demand that countries adhere to a rules-based order. The rules-based order, as Blinken and Biden and the Americans put it, was not the rules-based order. The rules-based order is the UN Charter and international treaties. What was being enforced under the rules-based order was an imperial policy to defend Western banks and corporate cartels. And it was an attack on the sovereignty of the nations that were being looted. So I think virtually every aspect of the explanations from Trump, from the media, from the U.S. military is false. Now, what do I think they're really trying to do? I think this is targeting the emergence of a new multilateral system. They're trying to say that we're not going to let Russia or China build railroads or bridges or power plants in South America. The same way they're saying that they're not going to allow that in Africa. And it's a form of ultra-imperial policy which is based on the idea that we have the power to dictate the terms. And if you don't agree with us, we have color revolutions, we have regime changes, we have sanctions we can impose, and so on. And I just want to add one other point. I was looking last night at what happened in Iran in 1953. And I bring this up because you now have a Venezuela-Iran situation as it existed in the late 40s, early 50s. In the late 40s, there was an effort to steal Venezuela's oil. And an agreement was made where the U.S. corporations got 50% of the oil money and Venezuela got 50%. And the British said they're not going to allow that in Iran. The British insisted that 87% of the Iranian oil go to the corporations and only 13% to Iran. This led to a national uprising in Iran, which voted in a president, Mossadegh, who then was overthrown in a coup by the British and the United States after he nationalized the oil. So now we see today, Venezuela and Iran, again, they're trying for regime change in Iran. Why? Because Iran stands for this principle of multilateralism. Similarly with Venezuela. And Venezuela has defended this principle against the likes of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who has a long connection to anti-Cuban networks that are run by the CIA. So I think what we're dealing with here is the end of an American imperial idea that says we have the power and we can impose the terms on every country. And the people of Venezuela are showing remarkable courage and discipline by standing up against this. I think people in Africa can look at this and also see that this is the way you have to deal with this, because we're seeing something similar going against Nigeria, the attempt to intervene in French West Africa and so on. We need solidarity among all sovereign nations to reject this kind of gunboat diplomacy or law of the jungle.
Need of collaboration to fit in the new rules that will actually put into consideration the transformations which have occurred over the decade. And of course, like you've highlighted, Holly, moving towards a multipolar world, but then we see that there is a huge resistance from the superpower, maybe a superpower of the days after the world wars, that is the United Kingdom, the United States of America, I beg your pardon. Coming back to you, Ricardo, when we listen to the holistic analysis, we still see the need to probably let the viewers out there understand that Donald Trump highlighted the fact that Venezuelans are suffering, and that he wants to take control of the oil to ensure that American companies will surely be charged and ensure to change the living standards of Venezuelans. But it is also imperative to understand that the sanctions that we are imposing Venezuela over the years, that was even during the Bush administration and Obama came in, we see that some of these economic sanctions actually impeded the steady development of the country, though the people are still very much, according to first-hand news coming from Venezuela, that the people are still in support of their president, Nicolas Maduro. So we are going to look at how, the interplay between the fight against maybe imperialism or probably control by a nation has actually brought Venezuela to a situation where we see the U.S. Probably using the vulnerability of a few Venezuelans to explain and give reasons to the world, even though it has not captured a whole lot of people because of the realities on the ground, as to why the military had to kidnap the sitting president. Let's understand history to know where we are at this particular moment and the next steps to be taken to ensure that the sovereignty of the state is protected and other states alike.
Well, of course, that the United States try to force social and to difficult the life of the Venezuelans inside of the country. They has been from 2015 since they determined Venezuela as an unusual menace by the Obama's decision, you know. They start to try to break the Venezuelan economy, and after that, when the sanctions start coming, when the unilateral coercive measures start coming, they start to hit the Venezuelan economy. But since the last 5 years, our economy started to run again. It was taking force, and that was the reason that the menace started to take force and become stronger, because they knew that we were getting out of the social and the breaking economy situation that they forced in Venezuela. That's one topic important to show, because it seems and it reveals that the sanctions are not useful when the people doesn't let them when the people fight for their freedom. So if you have a weak people, and if the people don't have a unity, of course that the sanctions will work. But when you see the Venezuelan example, that you bomb a country, that you put more than 1,000 illegal sanctions against a people and against a country, and they don't break out, it means that the sanctions are not useful. If you see the whole package of lies that they talked about Venezuela, they told that we had a drug cartel leader, and since the first day that Nicolás Maduro and Cilia Flores were kidnapped, they had to take off the cartel of drugs mentioned in the trial, because they knew that was a lie. And if you see Venezuela, if you come to Venezuela, you will see that Venezuela has not drug symptoms. What I mean when I say drug symptoms, there is a lot of people, addicts of drugs on the street, as in United States happens. You know, the people that is addict to fentanyl, to heroin, and the other kind of other types of drugs. And when you go to the regions, you know, the other departments of the country, you won't see, as happens in other countries, that really has been infected by the drug trouble, by the drug cartels, as it happens on Colombia or in Mexico, that you have Mexico, a sovereign country, a great country, but you have cartels financed by United States and powered with guns and weapons by American weapons factories, as it happens with the rifles factory, that all of their productions ends on Mexico, or as it happens on the regions of Colombia, that you have entire regions of the Pacific taken by the paramilitary groups that are the ones who are in charge of the drug commerce. And where does it end? It ends on the United States street, because they have a cartel on the United States that receive the drugs, and they have a cartel in the United States that deposit the money of the drugs, as Harley says, on the United States banks. It's obvious. And the other stuff is that we need to put on the table that every lie that lost only makes stronger the Bolivarian revolution. Well, at this day, they are attacking Delcy Rodriguez, and they are telling that Delcy Rodriguez betrayed Nicolas Maduro. That's important to know, because everyone on the media is trying to keep on the psychological war or the media war that the United States and Donald Trump has on Venezuela. And Delcy Rodriguez is not Delcy Rodriguez anymore. She has become a symbol of the republic. She is not more a big figure or a strong figure on the Chavismo. Now she becomes the leader, the temporary leader of the Chavismo, and all the Chavismo is around her, is protecting her, and is following her instruction. There's a lot of unity on the people. There's a lot of unity. That's important. I don't know if you have seen that. I've repeated this, but the center of the psychological war is on this. They are trying to break the unity on Venezuela, but they won't. We were bombed by the most, by the biggest machine of killing, machine of murder in the whole history of the world, and we resist that. We resist not only with our lives, we resist keeping the power. We resist keeping the way to rule the country, the way to organize the country, and our commune system will keep on. I'll synthesize this on this expression. Our way to be happy, our way to love keeps on after the United States bomb. They are not breaking the will of the Venezuelan people. They are not breaking the will of the revolution, of the Bolivarian revolution.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, in not breaking the rules, standing up by what the country stands to defend. And it is on that note that I will come back to you, Mr. Awosom. We are looking at, of course, being an international relations expert. We know what actually a revolution means for a nation, particularly a country like Venezuela. From Hugo Chavez, we saw that Nicolas Maduro actually continued in the same trajectory, defending the rights of the country and standing against any imperial act that will undermine its total autonomy, particularly diplomatic and political autonomy. Do you think that Rodriguez, who is now, like Ricardo just highlighted, the symbol or the first image of the country, will maintain this philosophy that has been ongoing over the years to ensure the total liberation of the country, and of course ensure that this will not be a problem, especially as it deals with external countries. We know that China is one of the countries buying Venezuelan oil. We also know its relationship with other countries, which is somehow why there is this infuriating activity from the United States of America. How can we navigate this under the new regime led by Rodriguez? Your mic is muted, please.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you very much for this opportunity once again. I must say that revolutions are very resilient in themselves, because mostly they emerge out of popular feelings, popular ideology, popular aspirations, and collective interest of the people. So whenever there is a destruction, it has a way of reorganizing itself and coming back stronger. That is what we have seen around the world. Unless the people themselves are not interested in pursuing it. But when they are interested, it is always going to come back stronger. The other thing is that in every country where these revolutions happen, we also have the antithesis of that revolution. That is the opponent to that revolution, who are also nationals. And I always say that the aspirations of these nationals should also be respected. Sure. Because if majority of the people in Venezuela are pursuing the Bolivarian revolution, and you had strong leaders like Hugo Chavez, Maduro leading it, you would definitely not find everybody within the country supporting it. And that, I would say that it's irrespective of external support. Whether there is external support or not, you find some people who have different ideas, and that must also be respected. But apart from elections, kidnapping people or kidnapping leaders has never been a way to show how popular or unpopular they are. So you allow the people to choose their leaders. You don't use force to enter someone's territory to extract the leadership. And that is where I will go back to Ukraine and I'll ask that what was the purpose for the first attempt to enter into Kyiv? Was to end the regime in Kyiv by Moscow. And that was also not the right way to go. In fact, it doesn't matter where a country is located, whether you are being surrounded or whatever, a sovereign country is a sovereign country. Today, Lesotho is within South Africa, geographically is surrounded by South Africa. If Lesotho today decides to enter into a union with Ghana, South Africa has no right to say, well, because you are within my territory, or that your country is located within my territory, or I'm surrounded by you, I have the right to stop you. A sovereign country is a sovereign country, and rule-based international system must cut across. It shouldn't be, well, for this one, it's a unique situation, for that one, then no two situations in the world are equal or are the same. So everyone will have reason for doing what he does, because he will find some uniqueness or peculiarity in whatever that he is doing. I pray that Russia loses in Ukraine, and I pray that Trump does not succeed in Venezuela, because these are all sovereign states that the rule system, the UN member, they have UN membership, and their sovereignty should be protected irrespective of how someone feels. If there are populations within these territories and are being discriminated against, there are still channels at the UN Security Council and other places to address these things. The use of force, entering into someone's territory with tanks, or using what Trump just used in Venezuela is never the way to go. Then, coming back to the resilience of the revolution, again, I would like to say, as an international relations person, I would like to say that sanctions are very legitimate tools used by states against others. So yes, the US has every right per international law to use sanctions, except when they are overstepping their boundaries with such sanctions. Countries have the right. Ghana can decide to sanction Togo if it feels that there's something Togo is doing that is not hostile to its interest. Nigeria can decide to sanction Cameroon and vice versa if they feel so. But going into the country and organizing a military operation to kidnap the leader is very disruptive, illegal, and the rest of the world must always come together to reject such decisions. Again, the resources that the Venezuelans have. The oil that is in Venezuela belongs to Venezuelans. It is not for the Americans. It is not for Trump and his colleagues. It's for the Venezuelans. Venezuela can decide not to extract this oil and leave it beneath the oceans or wherever that they are for posterity. They can decide to sell the oil to whoever they want to sell it to. Immediately, you tend to become the policeman in the Gulf of Mexico, which, by the way, Trump has also changed the name of Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of the United States. These are some of the very unorthodox things that are being done currently in the United States. And you look at all these and you realize that, look, some of these decisions are personal decisions, like has been mentioned by my senior colleague. They are personal decisions. Marco Rubio, you have a Secretary of State who is also the security advisor. In ordinary terms, you find whenever such controversial decisions are going to be taken, you find some kind of debate between a national security advisor and the Secretary of State. Mostly in the United States, national security advisors have appeared to be hawkish, with the Secretary of State trying to be moderate, mostly, not all the time. But currently, one person holds the two positions. So Marco Rubio argues with himself on what the United States national security policy should be.
Absolutely.
And that is the result we are seeing in Venezuela. And currently, I've heard Cuba and other governments being threatened in the region. This is not the way to go. We are increasingly, as I've mentioned, having a multipolar world. And when you threat that way, it could trigger something that could destroy humanity. And so, reasonable people should come together against this aggression by the President of the United States. Thank you.
Yeah, I will stay with you, Mr. Awusu.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
of course, our topic centers on conquest and militarism. And if we can understand that diplomacy is all about, or international relations is also all about fame, control, and of course power. You quite mentioned, if we look at the utterances that have been made by people concerned in the Ukraine crisis, you see the European Union unanimously saying, I will now quote Joseph Borrell, who said that they are not involved in Ukraine for Ukrainians, but for a proxy tendency. And of course, we are tracing back this crisis to events that occurred since 2014. The special military operation came 2022, and not actually given reasons for maybe the Russian Federation still trying to, understand with you the precepts of international relations and diplomacy. We saw how it was played in West Africa lately. How Nigeria invaded Burkina Faso's airspace, and of course, when security, you are a security analyst, and you know what it means for a nation's security to be at stake. Let's try to understand probably from the point of the definition of relations, or of international relations, as the quest for fame, power, and control, and also the protection of one sovereign state in line with the events pertaining the Ukraine crisis and other crises across the world, similar to what we are having in Venezuela at the moment.
Yeah, so if I got the question right, it's on Ukraine, right?
Absolutely, because you quite mentioned that Russia invaded Ukraine, but then with the events that happened, of course, let me give you the floor.
Yeah. So Russia invaded Ukraine. There's no two ways about that. It was wrong. You don't rule. You don't get into someone's and then try to change regime. And when it fails, you start taking territories and all that. In fact, in 2014, when it took Crimea, it was still wrong. You don't enter into someone's country with badgeless people. And in fact, you see, there is something. If we want a rule-based world, we must be fair.
But there is no rules-based world, given the decision of the U.S. that has always been a policer. You saw that in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, and other countries.
Yes, so it was wrong. And it doesn't make any other decision by any other power right if it is on that lines. Mm-hmm. So that is very important. Then you raise the issue of Burkina Faso, and that must also be clarified. So there is an aircraft from Nigeria that was seized in Burkina Faso because it has breached the airspace of Burkina Faso. Mm-hmm. Eventually, the two countries have agreed, and these guys with the aircraft have been released because the explanation was that the aircraft was on its way to Portugal and it developed a problem. Now, the issue has to do with whenever countries have issues or countries have misunderstandings, how they resolve these misunderstandings. Yes, the US may have some issues with Venezuela even before Trump came to power because there have been sanctions. You use diplomacy, and we saw in the last days how Nicolas Maduro was using diplomacy that, well, if there's something, we have to talk about it. If there are some misunderstandings, we need to sit and talk about it. But all these appeals or these offers were declined because they had a more aggressive way to get rid of him, which is not by any means good. So then the essence of diplomacy is to resolve these tensions among states. So if Russia had issues with Ukraine, yes, there were talks. But you talk until something is done.
And it's because of the complexity of the event with many actors involved without actually maybe interrupting you.
Okay, so the U.S. can also say that, well, China is getting too close to Venezuela, and Venezuela is closer to me, so I'm also going to arbitrarily extract a leader because China is close to Venezuela, and Venezuela is shipping oil to China and things like that. Everyone can have a reason, as I said, to do wrong. So Venezuela is an independent state, a sovereign state, and Ukraine is also an independent state. We do not have to. Ukraine is no less an independent state than Venezuela. So I think that great powers or powers that have the means and very overwhelming influence should know how they limit themselves when they are dealing with relatively weaker states. Because when it comes to the might, military might, one may be stronger, but when it comes to sovereignty, none is smaller. Every sovereign state is a sovereign state, and nobody should interfere and try to end regimes within this state. When that happens, it leads to a chaotic world. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to note, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just tuning in, this is Global Insight brought to you by Globus. And today we are looking at militarism, conquest, and how this is undermining international law, order, and the sovereignty of states. And of course, looking deeply into the real, stakes of international relations, diplomacy, foreign policy dynamics, and how this actually affects globalization and international cooperation. Case study being Venezuela and other countries with similar situations. Coming back to you, dear Haley, probably you wanted to make a comment in line with the two events, that is the Ukraine crisis and the Venezuelan crisis, probably on similarities, if there are, and of course, how different the two issues or events are.
Well, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Owusu on the Ukraine situation. I've studied this for years. I live in Germany now, and I've seen the documents. There was an effort going back to the fall of the Soviet Union by Western corporate cartels, the CIA, and the British, to figure out how to break apart Russia. And their idea was to treat Russia as a colony, as they have been treating countries of Africa for generations, for hundreds of years. The idea that Russia has raw materials, but Russia was weak because of the fall of communism, and you could now go in and impose economic policies, the so-called shock therapy doctrine, which undermined Russia's standard of living. Now, they repeatedly discussed this. The Primakov, who was the prime minister in the end of the 1990s, finally said, look, we have to form an alliance with India and China to defend our country. And at the same time, there was the move of NATO eastward to the borders of Russia, because there were people in the West who wanted to break apart Russia, who were open about this. Now, what happened? Well, in 2014, as Victoria Nuland admitted, the U.S. had spent $5 billion to organize a color revolution in Ukraine. Now, that's where you see the evil policy of the American deep state, that they spent money to rile up the Ukrainians to turn against Russia. And the coup that took place in February was a coup. A Western especially U.S. and British coup, using neo-Nazi elements of Western Ukrainian militias to carry out the coup. Now, Putin appealed repeatedly for discussions of this, and there were discussions. In fact, let me remind you of the Minsk Accord, where the French and the Germans said they would work with Russia to end the attack on the people of the Donbass. And what did Merkel admit? What did the French president admit? They never intended to do that. They signed that agreement to buy time to arm Ukraine. So when you look at the Russian actions on Ukraine, and I agree with you, you never have a right to say, well, someone else did something wrong, so we can do it also. But I think Putin made the point repeatedly that he tried to resolve this, and he couldn't, because the West intended to loot Russia and to gain acceptability for this form of internationalism. This is what the United States has been doing. This is what happened in Iraq. It's what happened with Afghanistan. It's what happened with Libya. And you know very well, Mr. Owusu, this is what's been done to every single country in Africa, including your own country. So the Western powers assert their superior right to determine what the rules-based order is. And I think what we saw with the special military operation in Ukraine was an attempt to call attention to this unfair, unjust policy. Now, had Putin wanted to, he could have destroyed Ukraine, but he didn't. Now, here's where I see the difference with the United States going into Venezuela. I don't trust people like Hegseth, who now calls himself the Secretary of War. I don't trust Marco Rubio. Rubio is a vindictive, evil character who is working with CIA networks that were involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. And he sees himself as a revolutionary, not just targeting Venezuela, but targeting Venezuela to get Cuba and to get Mexico, and possibly what they're doing to Argentina with the government there, and what they'd like to do again to Brazil if they could bring back Bolsonaro. So we're talking about a very nasty imperial regime in Washington, which claims the right to do this to any country that doesn't accept their so-called rules. So I think that's the big difference between the Ukraine situation and Venezuela. There's an attempt to get peace in Ukraine. Who's opposing it? The Europeans now. And the Europeans are opposing it because they want a military buildup. The Germans are talking about €1 trillion in building up an army to go to war against Russia. So I think they're while in general the idea of moral equivalence is right, that you don't accept unjust activities against a state, there are different circumstances, and you have to take that into consideration when you're dealing with the Russia-Ukraine situation.
Ladies and gentlemen, that we continue to analyze the high-stakes shaping the global world, and in the course of the program, we're still going to look at the interplay between power, military might, and of course fame in terms of international relations, and why there is the roles-based order, and even the UN Charter is decaying in this era of multi-polarity. And we are live on YouTube, Pan-African Media TV, and Facebook, Pan-African Media TV. So you can leave your comments of what you think about this topic and how relevant it is with the latest development happening in the global world. Thank you so much. Before we continue, let's take an excerpt which was actually done by Ricardo. He earlier on highlighted the fact that Venezuelans are still, hoping for the release of the president, and of course it's a president that was highly loved by the people, majority of the people in the country, contrary to what the media narratives, especially from mainstream media, has presented to the world, and we'll watch the excerpt and then we go on with the conversation thereafter.
January 7, this is the demonstration that the people of Caracas is doing to support Nicolás Maduro and Cilia Flores from their kidnapping. People is striking and demonstrating on Caracas to send a message to the United States. You have to free Nicolás Maduro. These people won't left the street until Nicolás Maduro and Cilia Flores are free on their own country.
Porque estamos reclamando a nuestro presidente Nicolás Maduro, que vilmente fue secuestrado desde su casa durmiendo, como todo ese vil gobierno desgraciado Donald Trump.
Pero estamos en la calle, la gente de las comunas, del poder popular, defendiendo y legitimando a nuestra presidenta Delcy Rodríguez y solicitando expresamente que liberen a nuestro prisionero de guerra, a nuestro presidente Nicolás Maduro, a la primera combatiente. Seguiremos en la calle, no descansaremos ni un día.
¡Liberen a Nico! ¡Liberen a Cilia! ¡Nico es pueblo y Cilia es dignidad!
It's about to start to rain on the city of Caracas, and the people is still on the street demonstrating their support to Nicolás Maduro.
Aquí defendiendo a Nicolás y a Cilia, no joda, tenemos que rescatarlo lo más pronto posible.
Aquí quien tiene que estar preso es el pedófilo del Trump, ese desgraciado.
And of course, that peaceful march happened in Caracas, where you see Venezuelans marching in support of the liberation of their president, Nicolás Maduro, and wife. We are going to comment on this, taking a clear example, still with what we mentioned earlier on. We know what sanctions, especially economic sanctions, can mean for a nation. Zimbabwe is a case study when former and late president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, stood against Western dominance. The country actually had a whole lot of economic sanctions. And this actually affected the living standards or livelihoods of Zimbabweans. I quite remember a scenario, I'm not quite clear with the dates. There were protests actually calling for, for Mugabe to ensure that the conditions were actually good for the citizens. People who were actually not aware of the effects or the ripple effects of the economic sanctions. And I remember Mugabe addressing the Zimbabweans that day and actually detailing the realities of why some Zimbabweans are still suffering, and it's partly due to such economic sanctions. It will bring us back now to Venezuela. We are now seeing a march not against Nicolás Maduro, but now a march in favor of his liberation, and how we want to understand how it is imperative for nations to understand what the values of a state, so as to know what to defend should a country come across an attack, especially in line with its sovereignty and strong will in terms of foreign policy dynamics. With you, Ricardo.
Well, this video was from 2 days ago. Each day there are thousands of people demonstrating on the city of every corner of our country. I mean, at this moment there is a demonstration of people supporting Nicolás Maduro and Cilia Flores in the city of Caracas, but this expression repeats on the other 24 departments of Venezuela. And this is important to highlight because they wanted to this country become a jungle, as Harley says, but he talked about the diplomacy and the international order. They want these people to become a disaster, and the whole media said that if they, and the United States thought that if they kidnapped Nicolas Maduro, there was about to start some kind of fights inside of the powers and people inside of the country. But it's important to highlight that the Minister of the Interior and Justice, Diosdado Cabello, yesterday told that remarked that the monopoly of the weapons are inside or is on the authorities, the military troops, and the police. Is a total lie that Venezuela has weapons everywhere and is some kind of people in war. We are a very peaceful people, and we will fight and recover and win the release of Nicolas Maduro, marching on the streets, demonstrating everywhere, and we are really we really think that the people all around the world is taking the streets asking for the liberation of our leader. We know that what Donald Trump is doing is, or in my opinion, Donald Trump is following the steps of maybe Adolf Hitler or some kind of international dictator, because what we want to do with Colombia, and what he wants to do with Mexico and Greenland, it's a criminal act of war, as he did on Venezuela. What kind of world are we going? What kind of world are we going to legate to our children? What is he talking about when he says that he's going to bomb or kidnap Mr. Gustavo Petro on Colombia? Or when he moved the boots, the military ships to Cuba? What it's going to do Europe in this case? Is he trying to promote a war? A regional or a global war again? Are we going back to the moments of Rome, Imperial Rome? So it's important to highlight another thing, is that Venezuela is back to the 19th century, when the Spanish imperialism took the colonies in the whole Americas, and there was two people situations or positions: the patriots and the pro-Spanish. In this case are the patriots or the imperialists. But in the whole world it becomes different, because I think that there are the people who want peace, or the people who supports the freakness and the madness of Donald Trump. We are going to that situation. If you support Donald Trump, it's because you support war. It's simple. He's trying to take the war every part of the world. Look at the offensive, the coordinated offensive that the political extreme right took at this last week. The situation with Ibrahim Traoré, the situation on Iran, the situation on Latin America, the situations against Cuba, against Greenland, the movement or the intentions of a reoffensive of Ukraine against Russia. It's a coordinated movement of the extreme, of the far-right politicians, of the far-right movement. And we have to stop this. There is more people interested on peace than the people that is interested of going back to a monopolist world governed by United States. It repeats inside of the United States. Donald Trump lost the first Congress, the first Senate decision about Venezuela or about bombing against Venezuela. This is a small victory, but we have to act fast before before this crazy man attack another country. Well, I think we will win. I'm very optimistic because the opposition of Donald Trump on the street is getting stronger. And in Venezuela, they thought that they will win on this trial to change the regime, and we are becoming stronger on the inside. I invite everyone. I invite the people who see this interview, the people who see this TV show, and I appreciate. I really think this opportunity, because we can send this message to the world. Come to Venezuela, check the situation inside Venezuela, feel how the people of Venezuela is living this moment, and we are very optimistic. Of course, we was impacted by the attacks. We are very peaceful people that we didn't have a conflict since our civil war. That it was like almost 100 years ago, since our independence. We weren't inside of this kind of conflicts, but we are not afraid. We are making our social core, the communal councils, the communes, very more strong. We are trying to make them stronger with more organization, with improve to our communications. We remember what Israel did to Libyans with this operation with the walk talks. This radio for communicates. But we are trying to improve every way to keep our people safe, to keep our people on communications, but the situation is very normal now. Next Monday, as I said, our children will return to their schools with normality, and I extend the invitation to come and see what really happens inside. It's not as international media says, it's not as Donald Trump says, and I repeat, we will not become a colony. We will keep being an independent country, we will keep being an independent people, and we will defend our sovereignty with diplomacy and with every resource that we have.
Absolutely, yeah. Of course, defending the values of the nation for the prosperity of Venezuelans or nationals. Still, on the news, we see how the U.S. Senate, of course, is trying to limit the military might or maybe the actions of its president, Donald Trump, and it will bring us again to understanding decisions that do not actually support war. When the U.S. invasion happened and Maduro was kidnapped, we saw news, probably comments asking for China, Russia, the BRICS nations, and other upcoming nations to probably take a military action against Trump to ensure that they protect the interests of Venezuela. And I would love that we also analyze the decision. Maybe Russia and China and other countries sent out strong messages condemning this action, and other countries did. But we didn't see a third-party country entering, into another military confrontation in order to salvage the situation. And I think this is about checking to ensure that the situation doesn't deteriorate further. With you, Hali, understanding such a move and how it helps to bind diplomatic solutions to such decisions rather than further military confrontations between other nations.
Well, I certainly appreciate Ricardo's passion and commitment to his nation. And I think it shows that the people of Venezuela have no other intent than to defend their sovereignty. Now, this is really the fight that's going on in the world. It's not just that Donald Trump is acting crazy. What Trump is doing is defending a system which is collapsing. The imperial system is collapsing. Look, the United States has almost $40 trillion in debt. It's more indebted than the poorest country under the International Monetary Fund conditionalities. Germany is shutting down the auto sector. The people in Britain can't go to the National Health Service because they're closing many offices. In France, Macron keeps losing one government after another because of his austerity demands. So what we're seeing is a breakdown in an imperial system, which is largely there for the benefit of the global corporations and the corporate cartels, especially banking and finance. And we're about to see in the United States whether there's going to be another 2008 type crash based on the artificial intelligence stocks going down. So this in Venezuela didn't happen in a vacuum. It's happening in a system which is breaking down and in which there's an emergence of an alternative system centered around Russia, China, India. Now it includes Indonesia, it includes Nigeria, it includes any number of other countries, including African countries like Ethiopia, the Saudis, the United Arab Emirates. They're all going toward the BRICS. Now, the BRICS don't represent necessarily an attack on the dollar, but a defense of sovereignty of these countries. But the Western press said that the BRICS represents an attack on the United States. And that's what you hear from the U.S. military when they say we've got to keep China out of Venezuela, we've got to keep Russia out of Latin America. The Chinese just built a beautiful port in Peru that's going to help the Peruvian economy. How is that a threat to the United States? Well, it's only a threat because the United States has had bad economic policies that are leading to a collapse of the Western system. So the solution is not to go in and plunder other countries and try and steal oil and gold and strategic metals. It's to work in a relationship with the BRICS and work out, as Mr. Owusu was saying, through negotiations and diplomacy, cooperation. How does the United States benefit if Venezuela is made weaker and poorer? How does the United States benefit if countries in Africa are forced under conditionalities which won't allow them to provide food for their people? So the Western policy, especially the United States and the City of London, Britain, are on a suicidal course. And what they're doing is they're trying to blame Russia and China for the idiocy of their own greedy, stupid politicians. And so what my organization, the Schiller Institute, is saying is, instead of fighting this, join with the BRICS, form a new international security and development architecture. And I think, as both of the other guests have said, there is a shift in the United States away from this idea that we have a right to go and plunder other countries. So I think this is what we have to fight for. I think this discussion is extremely important and useful, and we have to make the distinctions between cases where you have a covert intent, as in the West had with Ukraine to turn it against Russia, or use Taiwan against China, and the desire to defend the sovereignty of countries that are being attacked by the imperial powers.
And this brings us to another part, looking at the place of the United Nations. Just to note that when BRICS came with the plan of de-dollarization, we saw that Donald Trump still stood firm to say that he will actually attack countries that fight to see the fall of the dollar. And that is also actually happening in the sphere of diplomacy. We come with you Mr. Awoso, we're taking the case of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. We saw recently or lately the president of Rwanda and DRC were in Washington to sign a peace pact. But then we saw afterwards how Trump said President Kagame and Felix Tshisekedi outrightly told him that come and take our minerals. And we now want to look at how the interplay between sovereignty and why it has to be protected. And now we are looking at the place of the UN. Has the UN lost its, potency in terms of ensuring that its charter in terms of sovereignty and respect for, national interests of sovereign states are concerned? We note also that for over 30 years, the UN peacekeeping force is in DR Congo, but no respite. The country is still very restive. So how do we use now the recent invasion of Venezuela to analyze the position of the UN at this juncture in a world of multipolarity?
Thank you very much once again. This is quite loaded. I'll take from the African perspective. When Rwanda and the DRC were in Washington and Mr. Trump was so confident about the willingness of African leaders to offer their minerals to the United States and how that, because of that, we're going to have peace in Eastern DRC. When I saw that, I was really fascinated. It was interesting to me because then I knew that is not the case. In fact, I did not only know, I wrote about it that day. In Eastern DRC, it is not about what is signed in Washington. We need constructive peace in Eastern DRC. We need African solutions. It is not a matter of some leader who feels that he is solving so many conflicts around the world, and you cannot actually pinpoint one single conflict that he has solved, but he keeps claiming that he has solved conflict, and he's saying that, well, if you sign a deal with me, there's going to be peace. So I wrote that, look, in Eastern DRC, there is no way a paper signed in Washington was automatically going to lead to peace. It would take constructive engagement. It would take real solutions on the ground in order to find peace in Eastern DRC. Because whatever that is happening there has colonial connections, post-colonial connections, and a whole lot of dynamics in recent decades. So it would take Africans to come together, bring people around the table to resolve the crisis that is happening in Eastern DRC. Now, the Trump administration has been really obsessed with African minerals. And in many instances where it has become hostile towards some countries in Africa, the next communique or the next communication is that, well, we can have some deal of some sort over rare earth, over critical minerals, and all that. Now, there's no problem if Africa wants to trade with the United States. I don't have any problem at all. But the issue is when it comes to look like, well, you don't have a choice, but you have to sign some deal with me, then it becomes a problem. Because then that will look like imperialism. And that is not so good for the African population. We have youth that are becoming increasingly conscious of that. And when you keep demanding that you need some deal of some sort to have peace on a continent, then it becomes suspicious by all standards. Then you move to the UN as an organization. In fact, the UN was created as a victors organization. After the end of the Second World War, the victors of that war became the architects of the UN, led by the United States, where it was located. I mean, the headquarters was located. And the victors became the 5 permanent members. For China, it took a long time because then the seat was given to Taiwan until such time in the 70s that it became apparent that it was no more practical to have Taiwan occupying the permanent seat in the UN, that it was given to Beijing. Now, after that, a lot has happened. A lot has happened that needs reforms. And Africa has consistently said that it wants to be part of the UN Security Council. Now, two continents, South America, where Venezuela is located, and Africa do not have any seat at the UN Security, any permanent seat at the UN Security Council. They join the rotational seat or the non-permanent seat, which are, inconsequential. Absolutely. And in recent times, Africa has fought or has advocated to have these seats, at least two of them. As to which country is going to occupy it, it has also become a debate, and that's why I'll call for African unity in this direction. Because Egypt wants that, Ethiopia wants that, South Africa wants that, and Nigeria also wants that. Algeria has also shown interest, as well as Morocco. And we believe that we have to have some kind of consensus in order to have at least two countries occupying this seat. If the UN indeed becomes open to that, or the permanent becomes open. The last time the United States actually gave a positive signal to this demand was under Biden, when he said that in principle, the US wants to allow at least it will be open to having two African countries occupy permanent seats in any future reform. And we've had other countries like China, Russia, India, and others also advocating that Africa needs to be well represented over there. And until that is done, it's problematic, because it's like Africa has been isolated. In fact, in 1945, when the UN was being created, it was only Egypt, to some extent, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Liberia that were independent countries. So in creating the UN, Africa was never a bigger factor in the creation of the organization. And so now that almost all African countries are independent, technically, we need those reforms so that Africa can be well represented. Absolutely. Now, the question is, will the representation of Africa at the Security Council permanent, the P5, or then it's going to be either P10 or P7, is it going to change anything? It looks like the UN has no teeth to bite, generally, because mostly when issues happen, they issue statements and nothing is happening. But having permanent seat may not necessarily mean that it's going to change how countries would like to bully other countries. So despite what we want the UN to be, the most important thing is that countries must respect international law and must stay away from bullying others. That is very critical. Thank you.
Actually, against respecting international law, and which is quite interesting to know. Now, in the case of Venezuela with you, Hali Schlanger, you know, if a superpower can kidnap a head of state or a president with impunity, what can we say is left of this international law, or probably the UN Charter and international order or law in general?
Well, as I said earlier, there is no international law if a country can engage in this kind of activity, going in and kidnapping a president based on no legitimate evidence, based on just the desire to assert its authority. And I think this is the rest of the world has to recognize this. There's no reason why countries are so submissive in the face of threats coming from the United States. It just makes the situation worse. And the principle is, if you let a bully get away with bullying, they're going to keep bullying. And if that bully possesses nuclear weapons and a commitment to impose its will on every other country, then it's only a matter of time before you end up with a new world war. And that's the real danger. That's why it's so important to see the people of Venezuela rising up and defending their sovereignty. And we're seeing more and more nations do that. And that's the main antidote to the kind of hyper-nationalism that we see from the United States And now we're seeing it from Germany, from France, from England, where they're saying that they're going to prepare for a war with Russia. So I think the point that we have to get across clearly here is that nations have to be straightforward with their people, defend the idea of sovereignty, and also engage in diplomacy to bring together common interests. And the final point on this is the question of diplomacy and negotiations. We've had a long period of time where we're looking at, for example, what the genocide in Gaza. And why is it that people in the West are turning their back on what Netanyahu is doing? That just encourages him. It encourages anyone that has more power than their neighbor to go in and grab what they want. So that's why I said at the very beginning, Clarissa, that the question is, do we have international law or do we have the law of the jungle? The argument of the Hobbes view from the 16th century that there is a battle of each against all, and every country has to fight for its own, and every person has to fight for its own. That's not a human civilization. And the United States has to be brought back into a commitment to real international law. And I would say that while Trump is more blatant in his opposition to international law and international rules, Biden was the same way. So was Obama. Look what Obama did in Libya. Look what Obama did in a number of other countries. Look at George W. Bush. Look at Clinton attacking Yugoslavia. This has been U.S. policy since 1990. And it's time for the world to say either we have a United Nations or we have no civilization. And that's what I think is the real issue.
And of course, looking for ways to bring about a global compromise, if actually that can happen under international relations, or maybe look for ways to rewriting the new international laws that will actually put into consideration the changes that have happened. We see countries of the global south rising. And of course, how will these laws be, updated to meet the present global status quo? We saw the divided nature of the United Nations Security Council when we listened to the different speeches presented by different ambassadors of different countries regarding the military action in Venezuela. And it was actually there that we again saw to what extent the United Nations has lost its or maybe its power to be like an international police, to put that in quote, because the U.S. seems to be the one playing that role, and how this is actually reshaping the narratives in Venezuela at the moment. With you, Ricardo, because countries like Brazil and others, before actually presenting their discourse, will say it's true that we do not recognize the legitimacy of Nicolas Maduro, but then still at the same time decrying the role played by the U.S. President Donald Trump, whose policies seem to be very radical in the kidnapping of the democratically elected president of the country. And then such utterances, and how this undermines the place of political democracy and what it is good for the people as a whole.
Well, in the case of international or the other presidents, it's important to know that if you remain silent now, don't say anything later, please, because it's the moment to raise the voice against these kind of criminal acts. It happened on Venezuela. After this, if you make silent, if Donald Trump wants, as is he saying, that the only stop is her own morale. There is no international laws or international rights over Donald Trump. So if he wants, maybe tomorrow he could kidnap, under his narrative, he could kidnap the president of Colombia or the president of Mexico or the president of Cuba or whatever he wants, or occupy Greenland or occupy Cuba, or I don't know if he imagined to go to another country that is outside of this list, and if he wants, maybe he could do that. So it's the moment, as I told, for the people who want peace or who want this new international jungle that Donald Trump is creating. The other point is that the proposal of the Bolivarian Revolution is a world based on mutual respect, a world that is based on the recognizing of a new South, a new order. I mean that permits that the unrecognized countries. Let's remember that this world order or these organizations that tries to keep the diplomacy and to keep the order were made after the World War II, and it needs to be updated beyond the creation of these little organizations based on rights or based on maybe new cultural stuffs. I mean, we need to reorder this in a new organization, or we need to update the UN on a new organization that allows the countries to talk in the same place, you know, on the same recognizing place, with the same rights, based on the peace. Not based on if I have more weapons, I can do whatever I want. So the proposal of the Bolivarian Revolution and the proposal of Venezuela, based in our principles, based in our moral, based in our history, is to respect the others and is to ask for respect. No more than that. It's equal relations. We are not attacking, or we are not making any kind of aggression to other countries. We just ask for respect. This must be repeated everywhere. Everywhere. It's the kind of word that we need. So that is why when many people say that why you didn't respond with a military action, we don't want war. It's not what we want, and in the other hand, there is a lot of people talking about the defenses on Venezuela and talking like they were military experts, and what would happen? The government of Venezuela is protecting the people, and we are talking about a nuclear imperialist country. We are talking about the most powerful military machine with a murder principle. We are talking about one of the most military powerful countries with a psychopath on the power. So we think, the people of Venezuela think, that the decision that we took was the most was based on wisdom, was based on trying to keep the peace, and was the most intelligent, based on our principles, based on our philosophy, and based on the love that we have on the people of our country.
Absolutely, which is very imperative that we understand this and see the changes that have to probably occur at the level of the United Nations Security Council, because when you look at it critically, you're tempted to ask, ladies and gentlemen, if actually the Security Council is being paralyzed by the veto power or the veto power of the United States. And of course, we quite listened to Samuel Munchada, the Venezuelan ambassador, and actually, but then no concrete decision taken by the UN in line with the complaints presented by the Venezuelan official. And then can we also arrive at that conclusion of stating like a double standard, where we see to a greater extent a Western outrage over Russia, the Russians action in Ukraine, and on the other hand we see the silence of the West, or maybe their support for Trump's Venezuela raid. We quite, you can know the comments that came from the United Kingdom. In fact, the whole of Europe, countries of the European Union supported this, while some actually could not say outrightly condemn the acts, but then there was some sort of an indirect or direct support of such an invasion on Venezuela, bringing us again to the double standards and the susceptibility of the United Nations. I think briefly you can bring comments, Hale, on how to revamp this United Nations that will build trust and solidarity among nations of the world and give relevance to the new dynamics of globalization.
First thing you need to do is reform the Security Council, which has the same powers with veto power since the founding of the United Nations. And it leaves out a number of countries that are from the global south that are growing. So if you really want to democratize the United Nations, you have to add countries from Africa, from Asia, in particular, to the Security Council. I don't know if that's going to happen. The problem you have is that as long as the United States is paying a lot of the bills, the United States is going to make demands. Now, maybe the best thing would be for the United States under Trump to leave the United Nations and then come up with a new plan without the United States, or kick the United States out. If it continues to violate the international law, I think this should have been done to Israel a long time ago. So the question to me, though, is not the United Nations. It's the people of the individual nations recognizing the responsibility to humanity as a whole. Because the principles of the founding of the UN Charter are viable, they're good. The non-interference in other nations' affairs, the idea of cooperation, of dialogue. Outside of the United Nations, there are very few places where people can actually sit down and talk, but in the United Nations now, with the current rules, it's hard to get an audience unless you're one of the powers. So I think this goes beyond the UN. We need to keep the UN as a place for dialogue, but it has to be reformed, and I think the reform should start with the Security Council. The second point I would make very simply is that we have to have a premium on peace. And if we don't, we're heading on a quick path toward nuclear war. The idea that there are going to be American nuclear missiles put in Germany in July of this year is terrifying. The idea that the German government is pushing to have mandatory conscription of all boys and girls when they turn to be 18 years old to be prepared for a war is terrifying. The fact that the British and the French are upgrading their nuclear weapons, the fact that Trump just increased the U.S. defense budget from $1 trillion a year, which is huge, to $1.5 trillion next year. That's the sign of losing any intent to have negotiations in peace. So I think the most important thing is that people in all countries and all parties put aside the individual grievances they have and end up in actual dialogue and discussion. And if you don't have that, it is the law of the jungle. And in the jungle, the consequences are very often unacceptable.
So much. Coming swiftly to you, Ricardo, what is probably in terms of recommendation as we are moving to the culmination of this program, especially recommendation based on concepts of war, conquest, and power interplay?
For having some kind of conclusion, please, we need to set some trustable sources of information in Venezuela. Please try to make contact with trustable media, with trustable sources. I mean, the principal sources of the government, because there is a lot of there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation on internet, principally on the USA government sources and the ones that are connected with them, because this psychological war and this media war hasn't stopped. Is still going, and I think that is getting stronger because they are having some kind of retreat, or they stop bombing, but they need to break the will of the Venezuelan people, and they'll try to break the support that we can have outside, that we can have in the international. I mean, in the other countries. So try to keep or to have trustable sources, and well, let's defend the truth of Venezuela. Try to have this kind of shows with Venezuelan journalists, with people that is inside of the country, because we gotta fight. The war is not only with weapons and with guns. It's also with cameras. It's also with mics, and with this kind of opportunities that we cannot lose. Thank you, Clarice, and Pan-African Media. Thank you, Harley and Fidel. It's been a pleasure for me to participate on this TV show.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much for actually accepting and honoring the invitation to give us the real information on the ground in Venezuela pertaining the latest development. Before we round off, I think Ricardo will just this last part will just be with Hali Shranga and Mr. Also still, but before we go there, let's listen to former president and late president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. Some people have the viewpoint that probably we are just criticizing the United States and giving a voice to other emerging powers, but then this is something that has been ongoing over the decades, and even those from the United States, like Harley earlier said, the level of censorship in the United States makes it difficult for substantial information to actually reach the masses. And then we are going to see this cry against the U.S. using force to probably subjugate powers. It has been since here we are looking at Nelson Mandela condemning George Bush and war with Iraq. This was on the 30th of January 2003. If actually I got the statistics, and he was like, what I am condemning is that one power with a president who has no foresight, who cannot think properly, is now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust. If there is a country that has committed unspeakable atrocities in the world, it is the United States of America. They do not care. These actually were the words of Nelson Mandela, and those words are still resonating today from other officials looking at the radical position of Donald Trump, who has actually weaponized diplomacy, weaponized foreign policy, and international relations, putting the world in a state of quagmire. But then I will invite us to listen to Nelson Mandela and come back to our concluding statements.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are undermining an idea which was sponsored by their predecessors. They do not care. Is it because the Secretary General of the United Nations is now a black man? They never did that when Secretary Generals were white. What is the lesson of them acting outside the United Nations? Are they saying any country which believes that they will not be able to get the support of the countries which are settled are entitled to go outside the United Nations and to ignore it? Or are they saying we, the United Nations, are the only superpower in the world now? We can act as we like. Are they saying this is a lesson that we should follow? Or are they saying we are special? What we do should not be done by anybody. And if there is a country that has committed unspeakable atrocities in the world, it is the United States of America. They don't care. They don't care for human beings. 57 years ago, when Japan was retreating on all fronts, they decided to drop the atom bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Killed a lot of innocent people who are still suffering from the effects of those bombs. Those bombs were not aimed against the Japanese. They were aimed against the Soviet Union to say, look, this is the power that we have. If you dare oppose what we do, this is what is going to happen to you. Because they are so arrogant, they decided to kill innocent people in Japan who are still suffering from that. Who are they now to pretend that they are the policemen of the world? What I'm condemning is that one power with a president who has no foresight, who cannot think properly, is now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust. And I'm happy that the people of the world, especially those of the United States of America, are standing up and opposing their own president. I hope that that opposition will one day make him understand that he has made the greatest mistake of his life in trying to bring about carnage and to police the world without any authority from the international body. It is something we have to condemn without reservation.
Absolutely something that has to be condemned, and it is also imperative that we revisit history to understand how to probably ascertain the changes which have occurred over the years in terms of global governance and diplomacy. I will come with you Fidel also, we are looking at how the place of historical context to ascertain current geopolitical behaviors effectively, so as to ensure that the alternative narrative doesn't look like it's some sort of a war against, or media war against the former superpower US in a multilateral setting.
So thank you very much. Historically, we have seen a lot happen in the 20th century, where US moved from isolationism, because after the end of the First World War, the US Senate did not want to be part of the League of Nations, which is the precursor, or which is the first organization before the United Nations. The US didn't want to be part, despite Woodrow Wilson's determination to let the US join. The Senate thought otherwise. They believed in isolation. They thought that Europe was troublesome, and they didn't want to be part of it. Then the Second World War happened. Then the argument in the United States was that, well, we cannot be isolated in a world that we are becoming increasingly powerful in. And so then Franklin Delano Roosevelt decided that, well, we have to be part of the new international order. And that was the United Nations. And that's how come in San Francisco, the US actually led the discussion. And we eventually had Turtle Bay in New York as the headquarters of the United Nations. Then immediately after that, the two most powerful countries that came out of the Second World War, being the United States and the Soviet Union, they started what we call the Cold War. So with the Cold War, it meant that we had a bipolar world led by the West, and in the West it was led by the United States, and then the Eastern Bloc led by the USSR. And that meant that these countries had to battle it out, and for decades we saw how especially Africa became a threat for proxy conflict. We saw how regime change happened, like what Harley mentioned. Ghana was affected as well, where the CIA played a role in overthrow of Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. We saw the USSR also leading the charge against Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia in the Horn of Africa. We also saw how Patrice Lumumba was assassinated led by Belgium and other European powers in the DRC, and that country has not seen peace ever since. We saw how the West actually backed apartheid, and how Cuban forces were brought to Angola to fight the spread of the South African regime and Western influence in Angola, Mozambique, and other places, especially in the Portuguese colonies, where Portugal was not willing to relinquish that kind of power to the locals. Now, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, everyone thought that, well, the world was going to be more peaceful, the Cold War ended. Then we came to have a unipolar world, where the US became more or less of a master of all his obeyed. The Soviet Union had collapsed, Russia was weak and all that. But after some decades, we saw the rise, the increasing rise of China, and then Russia trying to reassert itself after some domestic reforms and other moves. This unipolar, multipolar world is something, whenever a system, and it has been for centuries, the Roman Empire, during the Greek civilization, where or the Hellenistic civilization, that eventually we saw what we call the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. Whenever a power feels that it has dominated the order for a long time and he sees the rise of others, there's always this denial, this competition, this suppression, and things that happen. And we've seen that, so from unipolarity to multipolarity, the US is still trying to assert itself. And we see China trying to claim a lot, and Russia trying to step into the shoes of the USSR. That is becoming a problem, because then it is leading to the clash of ideas, the clash of influence, the clash of military might. For the first time, we've seen China increasingly building its naval fleets. We've seen Russia occupying a former Soviet republic, that is Ukraine, and which, by the way, I still stand by that. It is not something that I buy at all. Hopefully, I don't want Russia to succeed in Ukraine. And that is something that we are seeing. With that, third world countries or global south countries need to have some solidarity. And that solidarity will come from how we trade amongst ourselves, how we find alternatives to the way we relate to these powers. Because I don't think that driving away France from West Africa and bringing in Russia is a solution. It is never a solution. We have to look within ourselves, trade amongst ourselves. Yes, I believe that Africa cannot develop in isolation. We need to trade and relate with other countries. But that should not be that kind of relationship where we see one side to be more powerful. It must be based on mutual respect.
Absolutely.
and understanding. So that is what I see that going forward, and I'll put this in with my recommendation that going forward, developing countries or global south countries must relate among themselves more in finding solutions for their own problems. But when it becomes vertical relations with individual countries and global north and other powers, it is always going to be asymmetrical, and that is not going to inure to their benefit. Thank you.
Absolutely, a lot has to be done. Of course, it's about reviewing how countries engage with other nations that will ensure a mutual cooperation. I think we have a lot to talk about to change the narratives across the globe, and especially in line with France's presence in Africa and how nations are reviewing their ties with the former colonial power in terms of putting into consideration the new dynamics of the 21st century. And to conclude with you, dear Holly, let's look at how probably international cooperation and the relationship between international cooperation and unilateral actions for peaceful world order, because if we are looking at the escalation today and the invasion of Venezuela, it's about because the US is fighting to maintain that unilateral position as the global police, but then change is actually a constant thing, and events have evolved, and we've seen other nations come to the fore. So how can we probably ensure some sort of international cooperation that will build a solid, peaceful world order that actually ensures mutual cooperation and respect of sovereign states?
Well, I very much agree with what Fidel said in his last comment about the importance of the global South countries coming together and forming a kind of, not an alternative bloc, but a basis for discussion with the former colonial powers. The colonial powers have to realize they no longer are powerful enough. The system is breaking down, and you cannot have a solution coming from diktat, from authoritarian demands. But I think the final point I'd like to make, Clarice, is I think the kind of dialogue that you have with these programs is absolutely essential, where people from different parts of the world can get together and discuss these things without animus, without placing blame, but actually talking about the common interests of mankind. And I see some of that taking place with the BRICS organization, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the African Union, the Organization of Islamic Countries. There are new institutions that are developing, and they need to be encouraged, and they need to be supported by people in their countries. And I think if we have the nations of the Global South working together to talk about the potential for peaceful cooperation with the global north, that's going to be key to moving away from this situation where we have the fight to see who's the next superpower. So I think that what you do with these kinds of seminars, I appreciate the discussion we had with Ricardo and Fidel today, and I think that's the people-to-people diplomacy has to be heightened if we're going to get out of this crisis.
Absolutely, it's about people-to-people diplomacy and ensuring the international law or order that actually put into consideration the human aspect of it. And this is on this note, I want to say thank you to the gentlemen that we had today on this edition of Global Insight for your great analysis on a topic which was centered on militarism and conquest and how this is actually affecting the global cooperation, with a case study ranging from Venezuela and elsewhere. And of course, we witness how this action has not just probably provided the position or exposed the position of the United Nations in Venezuela, targeting the oil reserves. It has also seen how shattered the United Nations Security Council and even the UN as a body is concerned in terms of ensuring that it maintains international order and sovereignty, things which are outlined in its charter. So we are going to continue to watch the development happening not just in Venezuela but across the globe, particularly in Africa, and see how the new dynamics happening along diplomatic, political and economic lines will change the world setting as we continue to find ourselves in a world of total global transformation. Should we adopt the Trump style of leadership, which is very radical, or should we adopt a leadership that caters for the interests of humanity embedded in the principle of people-to-people diplomacy? This and more will continue to answer in our subsequent interactive and knowledge-sharing programs on Pan-African television, brought to you, of course, by Globus. And on this note, I say bye-bye to you all, wishing you a splendid moment as you stay in the company of our transmissions. Bye-bye. Have a good day.